What's up, guys? My name is Kevin Snyder with the Fishing Prescription. Today I want to talk to you guys about how to maximize your success when you're out on the water fishing for flathead catfish. It doesn't matter whether you're new to this sport, very experienced, a professional. I'm somebody that lives by that you can learn something from somebody that's been doing something for a day or 50 years. Over the last, half a decade, I've been targeting these fish, and I've been fishing my entire life, but specifically for flatheads, I've been fishing for 4.5 years. I can tell you they are the most difficult fish I have ever tried to target and catch consistently. So keep that in mind and don't be discouraged when you're out on the water, because I've spent some lonely nights without a bite, a nibble, so much as the wind blowing past my line. They are a tough fish to figure out, tough fight, but it is so rewarding when you finally do start finding any kind of success with them. So today I want to talk about how can you catch more and potentially bigger ones as well. So where do I start? Every time I go out, I want to maximize the possibility that I'm going to catch fish, or at least a fish, and hopefully a big one. And where do we start with that, right? Before you go out, what do you need? You need equipment. So there are, the catfish market these days is for equipment and tackle and rods and reels and things of that nature. It's just booming, and it's continuously growing. My number one thing I'll tell you is, I don't know that there's a specific brand or model, but as long as you are confident in it, and you think and you believe in your heart, you feel that if a big fish takes your bait, you're going to be able to handle it with what you have, then I would say it's good. There's a lot of different brands. They're all great. Personally, myself, what I run, and I'm running this year, and I'll be continuously running from here on out. Big Cat Fever, medium heavy. It's a Penn Squall II, 20 level line. We have 50-pound slime line on there. This is 80-pound Whisker Seeker, heavy cover leader line. Now, I do run some Whisker Seeker 50-pound main line on some of my setups, but generally, like right now, I'm steering a little closer to the slime line. I like the slime line a little better, but it's what I'm confident in. Maybe you're confident in something else. I can tell you when I started targeting these fish, I used braid, 80 and 100-pound test, and I lost a lot of fish. A lot of fish, and some good ones at that. And that's how I steered clear of the braid, and I'll never go back for flatheads. Other species, it's different. Now, also, I run the 80-pound leader, and for any other species, I would run a lighter leader than the main line, so that if I broke my line, I would only lose from the swivel bound. For flatheads, I'm fishing really heavy structure sometimes, and I want the confidence that I can get a little extra freight up and rubbed against some rocks, or rubbed against a barge or a bridge or some timber with that leader line when that fish is running and digging, so that I know that I can still fight it and be able to land it and have the confidence in it again. So that's why I run the heavier leader, and it's paid off exponentially. But again, it's what you're confident in. Fish what you're confident in. But there's a reason that a lot of guys, big name guys, use a similar setup to this because it works. Next on the list, we have tackle. So for the tackle, I'm running like 100 to 300 pound barrel swivel the majority of the time, or I'll use a three-way swivel, but it's not just a three-way swivel, it's a crane swivel. The crane swivel is basically a barrel and then a separate barrel altogether on the top of the eye of the first one, so it's free spinning. And I'll use that for three-way rigs, obviously, but also we call it put the dog on a leash, where you'll take a sinker slide, you'll take the clip off of it, attach it to the extra swivel you have, and the fish can't pull line through that. You get snagged up much less through that, but I don't want to go too much into rigs right now because I'm going to do a whole separate video on rigs. But for the tackle, that's what I'm using. I use a lot of floats too. Flathead catfish, through evolution, have been designed to ambush prey from beneath. That is, biologically what they are designed to do. They have a protruding lower jaw, eyes on the top of their head, typical for any other species of fish that attacks fish from underneath. So a lot of my presentations are Santee Cooper rigs and variations of that, or a three-way rig. The floats I use, I'm a big fan of Whisker Seeker's Ultra Chub, in any color. I have variations of colors. And I also use, you saw on this rig here, these are large peg floats. I use the large ones to keep bigger baits, and sometimes I even use cut bait with that, so, to keep them up. I also use the Whisker Seeker Versa Rattles. I'm a big fan of them. I don't know if it helps or it doesn't help, but in my mind, again, confidence, and it's what I'm confident in. So if I'm using a regular peg float like that, sometimes I'll put the Versa Rattle behind it or in front of it. And again, I don't want to go too much into rigs. And then obviously, your weights. I could get away on the Ohio River with between usually 4 ounces, and some places like 10, 12 ounces I'll need it. But, I try to use the least amount of weight possible to keep my bait where I want it. And then separate from the tackle, which most people wouldn't think of this, but it's hooks. Because, A, I want to find fish. B, I want to have a bait that they might want in the water. I want to be confident that if a fish takes that bait, I'm going to be able to land it. But before that, I want to make sure that I'm going to put a hook in that fish's cheek. Because I've fished a lot of hooks, in my time fishing for these fish, and they are not all created equal. So, in my heart, what I'm confident in, and a lot of guys in the area, Maruto 348, 8/0 circle hooks, bar none. I very rarely miss fish, very rarely, and I very rarely will skin hook or tongue hook. Generally, almost every single fish, it's planted snug in the cheek, all the way down to the gap, and I don't have to worry about it. But there is a second hook I use, and that's the Whisker Seeker Triple Threat 10/0, and I use those specifically for large live baits. In particular, when I'm throwing bullheads, that's what I use. Big suckers, that's what I use. Like very large sunfish, if I'm throwing big crappie or something, I will also use those. But more often than not, I'm throwing Marutos all day, every day. If you're fishing with circle hooks, which that's what I'm doing, that hook is designed to be snell. That is how you get the action of the snell. That is how you have the good hookup rates. And you let those fish hook themselves, basically. So I'm not running a clicker system. I have rod holders that I'll talk about here in a second from Catfish I, and I let the fish load the rod up, basically. Sometimes I have to reel down to get it to hook, to stick and apply that pressure so it'll, slide through their cheek. But most of the time, man, especially the big ones, they hook themselves. So when you fish a polymer knot or a trilene knot, the hook on there tends to slide or move. So it can actually, when the hook is going to set in their cheek, slide one way and end up not making the contact and having the action it's supposed to have to implant that hook into their cheek. This is Catfish I rod holder right here. You can get these at Reddi Bait. As long as I have it pounded down to here, I am confident that I can keep it overnight as a ditty pool if I wanted to. And if a big fish took it, he would be there as long as my drag was set properly, be there in the morning when I got back. Now, it's illegal in PA, so I'd never do that, but I do sometimes have to go back to the car for things I forgot. And I'm always confident that I don't have to reel my baits in if I have to walk back up. As long as my drag is set properly, the fish will load the rod up in this rod holder. It will not move. I've had multiple 30s do it. And that also enables me to not have to use the clicker system which again, I've lost a lot of fish pulling a hook trying to, reel through them once I flip the clicker. But there are certain instances that I do use a clicker system, but it's very, very, very rare if I can't get a rod holder. I mean, I pound that rod holder through gravel and river rock beaches. So it'll go in anywhere, you just got to put some effort into it. Next on the list, we have bait. Don't be afraid to throw cut bait. People are going to tell you if you read and watch their apex predators, and they are, and you have to throw live bait. So I did that my first 2 years of fishing, and I caught fish, but I did not catch nearly as many fish. And I feel as though, looking back on it, I missed a lot of opportunities where cut bait really would have come in handy. Now, if the river is just dead, live bait tends to work a little better, but there's always current going. So that scent and that blood is always going to get moved down. And sometimes they want a little snack. That's it. A little cut bait. It's very helpful. A lot of people overlook that. The baits that I use and I'm very confident in are, green sunfish and hybrid sunfish are my two favorite sunfish. I use a lot of suckers, red horses specifically, they're larger. I like them for cut bait. White suckers and northern hognose suckers, I love them for live bait. Crappie and rock bass are really great as well. Any kind of bluegill I use. They're easy to catch, they're hardy, they stay on a hook, they're easy to keep alive, they're lively. They're a good bait, but there's a lot of times we go out and we're throwing bluegill and they don't eat the bluegill, but they'll eat the other baits we have. So I like to keep a variety. Bullheads, I prefer the yellow ones, not black. Yellow bullheads they can be smaller, but they can also be large, and I like to have a variation in sizes. For the bullheads, what I've found is taking some pliers and clipping off the dorsal fin and both pectoral fins, the barbs. I've had a lot of fish pick up bullheads and drop them. So just clipping those off has increased my hookup rate when I'm using bullheads, tenfold. So that's another little tip. I also use a lot of chubs. The problem with chubs is they're hard to keep in a tank because they always find a way out, but they're great bait as long as you get big ones. Small ones, you're going to get channel cats and other game fish that take those, but the real big ones, love those, especially cut chubs too. Like I'll put a couple slits and cut the tail off and then cast them out like that, still alive, and they'll die while they're out there, but great bait. Shad's a great bait. They're hard to keep alive, but if you can even pack them on ice as long as they're fresh. And skipjack. So my sponsor, Reddi Bait, right here, he sells, Tim down there, he sells very well kept frozen shad and skipjack, and I use that as well. It's great bait. Easy to pick up. You don't got to worry about going and catching it yourself or keeping it alive or anything like that. Who Tim gets it from and how Tim preserves it, is grade A. So if you're local, check that out as well. Tim also sells suckers, so if you're in the area and you need some bait, stop down at Reddi Bait. And then any legal game fish, so white bass, walleye, sauger. There's a sauger in my tank right now. Not everyone has something like this, and I understand that. I didn't when I first started, so I'd have to go that day and catch it. It's not always easy to keep bigger game fish alive, but if you're out, throw a lure, throw a shiner, a worm or something, you catch something and it's legal and it's in season, legal size, cut it up, man. It's great bait. Anything that comes out of that water that the fish are holding in is going to beat what you're catching from a pond, a lake, or a stream any day of the week. Next, the most important thing is, okay, so we have our gear, we have our equipment, we're confident that if we have the opportunity to hook a fish, that we're going to hook it and we're going to land it. Now, where do we go? Not every place on the river is created equal, and these fish are not in every place in the river. You're going to talk to guys, and they're going to tell you fish heavy structure, fish rock piles, fish rock ledges, fish outside bends, fish timber piles, industry, barges, cells, things like that. Well, what if you're on the bank like I am, right? The majority of my fishing is done from the bank, and it has been. So when I'm watching videos and guys are saying fish heavy structure, well, I don't know what's in the water. So what do I do? Number one, the last 2 years I've been using the Fish Smart app on your phone. It is a Humminbird product, and it's powered by Lake Masters, which in my opinion The quality of the content of the maps and contour is far more significantly better than Navionics, but to each their own. You could use Navionics as well. But if you're on the bank, I highly recommend you get some kind of depth contouring map where you can see how deep am I fishing, what is in the general area. The Lake Masters, it actually picks up some of the sunken barges for contour. You can see where they're at in the water, so it's very, very useful. But what do we look for, right? If you don't have that, use Google Maps. A lot of places you can start are creek mouths, obviously. Generally, the creek mouth will have a peninsula that jets out from it where it's accessible and fishable from the bank. And then any river mouth, things like that. Dams are great. But don't be afraid to walk off the beaten path. A lot of my best nights have come far off the beaten path, and a lot of those creek mouths and the dams and stuff, they get a ton of pressure all year long, every single year, and the fish get sore-lipped, they get smart. So find some new spots. Get out there, take a walk, find some new spots. But when I'm walking up to a new spot, what I'm looking for, is most of the time, I want the bank to be sloped going into the water as well. Because generally, that will translate. What you see on the bank will generally, not always, but generally, translate to what's in the water. So I'm looking for a hard bottom, generally gravel or river rock, big boulders even. On the bank, I like to see timber, a lot of washed up wood or sticks. Also, good for you. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, I fish barren, sandy flats because that's where the flatheads are feeding. They're feeding sometimes on sandbars and sandy flats. So depending on the season, what I'm using as bait, and how I've patterned them recently will depend on where I go. But if I'm going to a new spot, I want to see some rock, brick, boulders, trees washed up on the bank. I want it to not, when I walk up, I don't want it to be, like a beach, basically. I don't want it to be flat either. I want it to be sloped, going down, because that tells me I'm fishing a ledge. All right, so you found yourself a good spot. You have confidence in it. Maybe you heard stories. Maybe it's a brand new spot. Personally, I've had some of my best nights off of the unbeaten path. Don't be afraid to walk. But what do? First thing is make sure you spread your baits out. Try and cover an area to the best of your ability. You see a current seam, hit the current seam. Pull one in the slack water, pull one in the fast water. Vary the baits. If you have different kind of baits, vary them until you find what they're eating. Do that also with cut and live bait. Don't throw all one or all the other unless you're having success on that. And even still, sometimes it doesn't hurt if you've been having luck on cut bait, throw a live bait out there. It doesn't hurt if you've been having luck on live bait to throw a cut bait out there. Vary it and keep them spread out. If you're having bites in one spot, don't double or triple down and move everything over here because you don't know if the fish is going to move down through here or not. When you're there, try and figure out why they're there. If you catch fish, that's very important. If you want to be successful in the future, learn from each experience and each trip that you take. And if they're not there, the next time you go somewhere else. Try not to kill a spot out. Look for new spots all the time, and specifically look for ones that other guys aren't pressuring or have never fished. On the river system you're fishing. Personally, I'm on the Ohio. There's a lot of cat guys around me. It's a lot of work. I have to cut weeds down in bushes sometimes to get down to spots, and it's a lot of scouting. But it doesn't hurt to walk. But the other thing you can do is, so you have your baits spread out. Maybe you give a round of baits, one kind of location for each bait, and then move it up or down a little. But then don't be afraid if you're not having action after 2.5 hours to move, unless you're really confident that they're going to be there at some time that night. But I don't want to get lucky anymore, right? So if they're not here, I might move 25 or 50 yards up the bank, and that might make the difference in me catching fish or not. And in fact, like some nights I move 2 or 3 or 4 times, and sometimes I'll fish a spot and they're just not there, and I'll get my car and I'll drive somewhere else, in that night. The time period I'm looking for is like 2 to 3 hours in the spring but like 2 hours before dark, and 2 hours after dark. And I'm not talking like when your phone tells you sunset's at 8:30. It's really not getting dark till 9:15 or 9:30. So I'm talking like 2-3 hours before it's actually dark and 2-3 hours after. That's when I'm fishing from the bank during the weekdays. You know, I got work in the morning, so you know priorities come first. But if I'm fishing the weekend, I might fish it later or a little earlier. And then you can do that also with morning time. So 2-3 hours before the sun comes up, 2-3 hours after. I've had a lot of luck. Actually, most of my fish this year have come during daylight still, whether it was evening, middle of the day, or you know the morning time. I've caught more fish this year than I ever have during the day, and actually I think I may have even caught more fish altogether during daylight still this year, especially my bigger ones. All of my bigger ones have come from you know daylight still. So keep that in mind. But generally, you're looking to fish at nighttime. Most of them, especially during the summer months, you know, we're in the spawn right now here in Pennsylvania. We just hit, so I'll be looking, you know, for nighttime fishing pretty exclusively in August when it picks back up. They stay pretty immobile most of the day, and that's not to say if you put a bait in front of it, it's not going to eat. But there's not a whole lot of roaming around or feeding going on. They're held up in their homes, you know, during the daytime, during that pattern, summer pattern. So I'm looking to fish, you know, right before dark, right after dark, and during, you know, the darkness. And then, you know, right before the sun, like a while before the sun comes up, when the sun comes up, and a little bit after. And that's my experience. That's how I've done it. And I know a lot of guys, again, that go out and they hammer them during the day, year long. Again, I'm trying to maximize every single trip I take. How can I be the most successful? So that's the time periods I'm fishing. And, you know, just keep that in mind. Like, don't be afraid to move. Don't be afraid to, like, totally blow off plan A and go to plan B if you just lose confidence in it. And go with a plan A and a plan B. If this doesn't pan out, what am I doing next? You know, trying to have your next move already, you know, planned out before you get there. And maybe you think you're going to stay there all night. Maybe you don't think they're going to move into 11 or 10 because you've been having success around that time in feeding areas, you know. But that takes patterning, you know. That takes you having some time on the water to be able to figure that stuff out. Yeah, I mean, so I hope that you guys found some useful information in here. Again, whether you're very inexperienced or you're very experienced, that might help you be a better angler for flathead catfish. Again, I'm completely obsessed about them, and I can't wait till August when it picks back up. But for now, I'll target some other species. Again, I'll be bringing you guys some more action-packed videos, not just the educational stuff, but there will be educational stuff like this. Because this is the kind of information I was looking for when I started. So if you're like I was, then, and like I still am, I'm still watching videos on YouTube and reading articles. I'm still trying to learn every single time that I'm on the water and every single day, something new about these fish to help make myself, catch more and bigger fish than I did yesterday. So hopefully you guys can do the same thing for yourselves. Thanks for tuning in, and this is the Fishing Prescription. I'm Kevin Snyder, brought to you by none other than Reddi Bait.